Welcome to season 2 of Fresh Off the Boat, our podcast with Ed Brand students who've done wonderful things in their careers and during college. I'm delighted to be hosting this interview with Kaustav Singh, a student I've known for several years. He's graduated from Chapman University in Orange County, near Los Angeles in California. He's done a very interesting BFA in film, which is a coveted sort of program at that university. So welcome, Kaustav. Love to know more about your journey. So yes, anything that you would like to share encapsulating your 4 years of university life would be cool for our audience to know, particularly since it's such a creative field that you were in. And during the course, we'll also get to learn about your current interests in visual effects and all the cool things related to the future of cinematic sort of tricks and all the animations and things that go with it.
Yeah,
So my first question to you is, how was it like moving from Delhi to then being in Orange County at Chapman University? How was it like settling in?
it was, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I know that it's been a while. I mean, the last time I talked to you was about like 4 or 5 years ago, but Ed Brand really helped me with my applications, and I'll forever be indebted to you and the other counselors for that. Uh, so So when I first arrived, I mean, my college, Chapman University, which is in Orange County, which is about 20 miles or about like 45 kilometers south of Los Angeles. It's a completely different world. I mean, I grew up in Delhi, Noida, and just moving to Orange County, where you know the streets are just so clean, everything is so green, and it's not as diverse as other parts of the US. It's like it's almost all white people for the most part. It was just it was interesting to say the least. It was a completely different experience. But I'm glad that I had that. The first thing that I noticed when I got to Orange County, though, or when I got to America in general, was the excess, like the commercialization of pretty much everything. Was kind of a shock to me because I mean, it was also when I first arrived in the US, it was my first time in California. So everything was new and flashy and um, just, yeah, it was fantastic.
Okay, so when you started like settling in terms of orientation and the support that you got, what do you think uh, made you comfortable on campus, or what made you even uncomfortable in your early sort of days at Chapman?
Well, it was kind of unnerving to be like Chapman because it's a private university. It is except for the film school, the university at large is attended by local students, so people who grew up in Orange County, people who grew up in Los Angeles and the nearby counties in Southern California. So because I was new to that region, it was hard to settle into that SoCal lifestyle at first because everyone is just so laid back outside of Dodge, that is. And yeah, the education system there is completely different than what I was expected, than what I grew up with here in India. So yeah, I'd say that was one of the biggest challenges, was just learning how to communicate with people from a different region. It Another shortcoming of Chapman, I'd say, but they're definitely working on it, is that at when I first arrived at Chapman, it didn't have a huge Indian community, so I was one of the few people who had decided to attend Chapman from India. So but later on, of course, I mean, Chapman has risen in the ranks and a lot more Indian students are applying there now. But when I first arrived there, I think it was a little challenging to not have like an Indian community to support me. But otherwise, it was people were helpful, and I made a lot of great friends. And I think, in hindsight, I'll also say that not having that Indian community helped me, adjust to life in like parts of America where you won't find Indians. So I'd say I was blessed in hindsight.
Yeah, I think thanks for sharing that insight. Very often students look for a comfort zone where, look for colleges which have a higher percentage of international students, or even
Yeah,
with the international pool, many more from South Asia. It's interesting that there's always that benefit of really being one of a kind,
yeah,
and also finding your place in the community. My next question is more about Dodge, really. And I think the focus of this conversation will be around Dodge, film, careers in film. So, listeners here who are very keen on careers in the creative arts, so mixed media, visual arts, and film, would gain from what you've experienced. So tell us a little bit about what is it like to be a Dodge student, and how does it like begin? Like, since it was such a selective program within the
yeah.
university, how does it progress, and how easy or difficult is it to sort of get what you want in terms of not just the grades but experiences and build your.
Yeah. I'd say, I mean, it's an arts field, but it's unique in the sense that Dodge is pretty competitive. I mean, it's one of the top 5 film schools in the country at the moment, or maybe even the world. And it's, I'd say that even though I was having difficulty adjusting to people and the culture, one thing that really helped me was when I arrived at Dodge. It is Dodge is not, I mean, film programs in general are very different from normal academic programs because not only are we engaged in classes where we have to get good grades, we are also actively trying to get involved in student films. Everyone, pretty much every single hour that they are outside of class are trying to get on one project or another that either a senior is working on, or someone else is working on. Like, it's competitive in the sense that we're we're just working all the time outside of school because we want to be able to make those connections. We want to meet as many directors and producers and cinematographers uh, that we meet at the school. So because we never know who's eventually going to end up becoming famous. So we want to be able to make as many friends as possible, make as many connections. So we just end up working on as many Dodge school projects or other film projects that people who are associated with Dodge are working on. So I remember my freshman year, I had classes Monday through Friday, but I had kind of a slow day on Thursdays and Fridays. So most Thursdays and Fridays, I had class up until like 11 a.m. in the morning, and then after that I would have to go off to set or go off to help someone else, and then I'd spend the whole weekend on a set somewhere in Los Angeles, just working. So it was pretty competitive, I'd say, and I wasn't expecting it to be as competitive as soon as I arrived because that was just my first semester. But yeah, one of the great things about that is that because I'm thrown into this chaotic environment where I'm constantly meeting so many new people, so many random people, that it helped me sort of acclimatize myself to that environment. So
Yeah, that's pretty.
yeah, I'd say that was one of the better things about Dodge.
And also how the academics progresses, like the courses that you take, and then gradually as you progress beyond first
Yeah,
year, how do you
I
define your elective choices? What are the options
right,
available? What did your friends do? How did you make decisions as to what you're good at and develop your craft?
right. So when you first arrive in film school, you don't really know what niche of film you want to specialize in. One of the biggest Chapman is known for having a great cinematography program, so a lot of people end up going into the cinematography field. Um, so when you first get started at Dodge, you just end up going to all these sets and seeing how the seniors are working and how they're working and what kind of stress they're able to take on, and seeing them work is what really inspires you. So if the cinematographer inspires you the most, a lot of that the cinematographer is pretty busy, so a lot of people end up seeing the cinematographer work and end up, wanting to pursue that niche. So I think that helped me a lot in terms of, seeing. I mean, since I want to go into visual effects, I remember I was, hanging out a lot with the editors and the people who work in the post production process. But the other thing about classes in general at Dodge is that the first 2 years, I'd say, are very film studies based. That you'll be watching a lot of films and you'll be studying them and trying to understand, you know, uh, what works and what doesn't work. And I'd say the first 2 years are more academic than the latter two. Mostly because in the latter two, Dodge faculty expects you to sort of, find your own path. So in the third year, you end up declaring your niche. So I ended up declaring editing or like post production for my niche. So once you declare that, you're since I declared editing, I wasn't involved in the set process as much. And I was hanging out more with people in post production. So I wasn't going to set, but then I was sitting in like cutting rooms and seeing the film come together and then delivering it and then screening it. So that's pretty much how Dodge works. And then obviously when I was in my senior year, that's when I have to do my thesis. So my thesis is whatever niche that I've declared. For me was editing. I had to edit a film that was directed by one of the people who are chosen the directing niche.
Okay, great. So, I'll just rewind a little bit because this is really interesting that there are niches that students
Yeah,
can work on for the 2 years and then they have a thesis.
yeah.
So, what were the other niches in general that were popular and the ones which were not popular also, just so that everyone who's listening can also get a sense of what film schools have to offer?
Of course. I mean, like I said, Chapman is known for its cinematography program. So we have a lot of great faculty and who teach cinematography. So cinematography is pretty popular, and so is directing. Everyone who arrives at film school, wants to become a director. They have a vision for their own films. So directing and cinematography are the most common ones. Then is producing. Producing is pretty popular as well. A lot of women tend to go towards producing. I've noticed women in general tend to go towards producing. They're more inclined towards, handling the business side of things.
If I may, I want to step back even like, maybe one step lower than this. What is the difference between producing, directing, and cinematography? And how does it all work? Because the CEO is a
Of
director
course.
doing everything, right? Like it's
Yeah,
not
yeah, 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 yeah.
the hustler who's
Well,
trying to get the money and also trying to be behind the camera and gets that, interesting cover shot of people
yeah.
on camera.
Yeah, well, the main fields I'd say that Dodge offers is one is the least popular. Let me just continue on that path, and then I'll tell you.
So,
So the least popular is sound, which is a lot of the people who want to work with sound, and then there's editing. Editing, I'd say is like the second least popular. So there are five in total. There's directing, there's cinematography, there's producing, then there's editing, and then there is a sound. So the people in cinematography deal with camera stuff, camera angles, the lighting, preparing sets. All of that is a cinematographer's job, and they need to know all about cinematography in order to fill the different roles that make up that department in film. Um, then there is obviously the directors. The directors are the ones usually who come up with the ideas for the films, or there's a separate program in Dodge itself for screenwriting, which is not part of the film program, but it is part of Dodge. So oftentimes a director will take a script that someone from the screenwriting program has written, and then would want to develop that for their senior film or for their junior year film. And then then they usually have a producer that either the director chooses to bring on, or the producer decides to bring on a director onto a script that they might have found. So it's very collaborative. It's a very collaborative process between the director and the producer. Um, and then there is the editing program, which deals more with the post-production process, where once the film has been shot by the producer and the director and the cinematographer, then they'll bring in an editor from the editing program, and then the editor will basically cut the film on computers, and then it is sent over to the sound team, and then the sound team fixes the audio that was recorded during the shooting process, and then the film comes together. So that's basically how the different niches come together in a nutshell.
And then once the film is ready, the producer does the whole business side of it, the marketing.
Yeah, the producer basically, the producer I'd say is it's the busiest role in the film, because oftentimes if a producer is the one who's choosing the script that the screenwriter has written, it becomes their job to find a director for the film and then once they have to handle the whole shooting process and budgeting that, and then the director takes over, and then the director is more inclined towards the editing process, and then once the film is finished, then the producer takes over the film again, and then they you know try to send the film to festivals, or try to find a platform that the film would can be broadcast on. So that's where the producer becomes involved.
It's interesting that you pointed that there's some sort of a gender equation here where
Yeah,
women would wish to become producers.
yeah.
Is that for a particular, you see that as a trend because of the whatever tasking that one has to do?
I guess in a sense, yes, but it's just a trend that I've noticed in my years at film school. I mean, there's plenty of women who are going to the directing and cinematography field too, but cinematography in general has been mostly a male, uh,
Okay.
primarily a male profession in the past. So not a lot of women. You won't find a lot of women
Mhm.
going into that field, and yeah, but we see a lot of directing women in the directing program, but and in editing too, actually. But yeah, the sound program and the audio program is pretty much almost always male.
Great. So, you mentioned something about the junior project and the senior.
Yeah,
As an editor, the person who
yeah,
chose the niche to be an editor, so you work on a project which is already someone else's. So there's a lot of collaboration all the time, right? And
yes,
what
yeah,
were your two projects, and how would you describe your role in that?
yeah. So during my first 2 years, I was going on set pretty much every weekend. So it was. It I didn't really declare a niche up until towards the end of my second year because I was so confused. But then I worked on a project as an assistant editor on someone else's junior year project, and I realized why I wanted to go into the post production process rather than the shooting part of it. Um, and yeah, I my junior year projects were well, there was one documentary, and there was one fiction project, which was directed by good friend of mine from Pakistan, and he wanted to. Again, his project was unique because we didn't see a lot of Muslims at Chapman either. Chapman, Orange County in general, is having it's sort of because the college itself is primarily white, the university in general is primarily white. It's very unique to see, viewpoints from the Muslim community or the Indian community or other minority communities. So the film that he was working on was very had like Islamic themes to it, and themes that I could relate to because I grew up in Delhi, near a Muslim quarter. And so I was helping him edit this film because I understood the themes and I understood what he was trying to tell. The story that he was trying to tell a white audience. He was trying to simplify a lot of Islamic concepts, um, uh, so that he could explain it to a white audience. So he brought me on, and I had great fun editing that project during my third year. And then during my senior year, I worked on another documentary, which was actually shot here in India, in Gujarat. So we actually flew to Gujarat to get some to shoot some stuff, and then we came back and then we edited that documentary. So that was my senior year project.
That's amazing. So do you think the university has resources beyond just the equipment, faculty, and all of that, and of course the connections and people who they bring onto campus, even the budget to like just make that trip to Gujarat or do things? Do you have to
Yeah.
raise funds, get grants? How does it work?
Yeah, so a lot of that is handled by the producing students, but there is money available that the Dodge program gives you to get started. Um, I'd say for the third year films, the basic budget is about $10,000, and then you can choose to raise more money through, Kickstarter, or through by reaching out to producers or production companies who might be interested in funding the project. But in the fourth year, the senior year, you end up you have a budget of 20,000, and again you can raise more money if you feel like you have a more ambitious project in mind. So in terms of funding, yeah, they definitely help you out, and obviously the faculty is amazing, and the faculty helps people out in raising money, and connecting you to the right people outside of school, trying to understand one's creative vision, and then trying to connect you to the right people who might share that vision. In terms of all of that, I think that going to film school was a rewarding experience. And yeah, even after college, because Chapman is so well known in California, even during the pandemic, I didn't have a lot of problems finding a good job for myself. So the alumni are recognized, they're spread throughout Hollywood, and yeah, it's really good in those terms.
That was actually my related to my next question about career trajectories and for all the five niches that you described. Um, is there a way to navigate this as an international student to seek employment in the US? And I know you did 1 year of OPT.
Mhm.
Chapman was perhaps instrumental in giving you that network to tap into.
Yeah,
How does it really work? And does it really pay your bills or even your rent to be an
yeah.
artist? How easy or hard is it to survive in an expensive city like LA?
Yeah, I will say that because I chose a field, and the work that I did was, even though it was an entry level job, I think I made decent enough money to be able to comfortably live in LA. And Chapman, again, like you said, Chapman was instrumental in that. It was because of teachers who I had worked with, who had connected me to the people. I ended up working at Viacom for 1 year for my OPT, and I wanted to continue, but the one problem that a lot of Indian students or international students in general face is that in the artist fields there isn't much scope for an H-1B visa, which is kind of a shame. But if you're if if you end up building a good profile, and if you end up working hard enough during college, a lot of people end up making a name for themselves and end up applying for those O1 programs.
Right.
So I think if you want to work in the US, I think your best bet would be to go for that O1 visa, which allows one to stay in the US for, I think, about 2 years, and then it can be renewed depending on what kind of work is being done. So yeah,
Thing
I
that you
think
bring
that's the
up
best bet.
O1. Yeah, so
Yeah.
O1 is for people with special talent, right? And
Yes. Yeah.
so can you explain that a little bit? And if you were to walk that path, I know you're planning a master's, and that would that lead to an O1 possibly? And what do you have to do to do the groundwork to get that?
Yeah. Well, I am trying for an O1 visa. Um, The hardest thing about the O1 is that you have to show exceptional skills, right? I mean, the people who usually end up getting O1s are people, who've worked on Oscar level projects, at least in our fields, which is not entirely impossible. I have seen people, who are associated with projects at that level, even at a very young age. The basic groundwork one can do is really put their head down and whatever niche that they choose, make the right connections and try to make a name for themselves. um yeah, I'd say that's the easiest thing about it.
Great. Also going forward, I know MFA is always an option for students who've done a BFA. But then the question always arises, why do an MFA? Because
Yeah,
we've already been trained for 4 years. You've done an industry, 2 projects, and then 1 year of work. Doesn't like an art form and working in the field as an editor be all about like doing more work and then sort of finding your own sort of space in the industry? What is the MFA going to add to what you already have?
I think the biggest thing that the MFA can provide me is the opportunity to keep working on more projects that I was working on during my BFA. I would love to make more connections, meet more people who I could collaborate with in the future. It is true that during the BFA, I mean, during the MFA, I learned pretty much everything related to what I had already learned in my BFA. So, but except for that, I think the fact that I'll be able to be in that circle again, and the fact that I'll be making connections, is pretty much invaluable.
Sure.
And so that's pretty much why anyone would want to pursue MFA after a BFA.
One last question about again careers, and then we'll switch to maybe the last section, so the fun fact section, or the start.
Sure.
Uh, about coming back to India, like saying that okay, you get your MFA uh, after doing a BFA, working, and then doing MFA, and then do you think there is a job opportunity or even projects of uh, which require high talent like the one that you're being trained for available in India? And are those projects remunerative enough to make a living or make a name for yourself?
Definitely. I think, I mean, there are plenty of opportunities in India, plenty in Mumbai in particular. But, with the internet age and, the social media age, there will always be more work in our field. I mean, there is just so much content that is being created these days. Um, I'd say the opportunities are endless. But the one thing that would be great about getting an MFA in the US is that we will meet people from a lot of other countries. I wasn't, Indians aren't the only international students there. So I've met a lot of people from, Singapore, Malaysia, the Middle East, Britain, Canada, Mexico. And one of the great things about meeting all these people is that they have invited me to work on projects in their countries. So it's having those connections has allowed me to sort of not just look for opportunities in India, but also be able to work in those other countries as a freelance artist. So
Okay, fantastic. So, you've shared so much with our audience today, and it's just delightful to know the depth in your thought process of expressing what you've done, what you've studied, what things that you value, and the opportunities that you're looking forward to sort of exploring even further. So, yeah, all the very best to do that. But
thank
before
you.
we leave you, I'm going to ask you a few questions. And this is like, inspirations or books or role models. Tell us something that has really stuck with you in the last couple of years or few months, or this last 1.5 years during the pandemic. That's something that inspired you. Could be a book, project, or even a movie, or yeah, or someone you met.
Yeah, I mean, there have been several things, particularly during the pandemic, that inspired me. I realized that because I was sort of stuck at home and not able to meet a lot of people outside, I realized how important having a community, whether it is you know having a community that you can talk to online, can be. So for me, for example, I discovered something called Discord, which is it's an online forum where you can meet people who like similar things as you. And so when I was stuck at home during the pandemic and I didn't have much of a communal experience because I was kind of living by myself. I would often go on Discord and meet new people and talk to them. So I think that was a huge. It kind of changed the way I looked at um, talking to people and hanging out. People can hang out over Zooms. That's another thing that we as a society have learned during the pandemic. So, making friends doesn't necessarily have to be something that, you need to be in a particular space to do. You can make new friends online, and I think people are starting to learn about that.
Thank you. I think this is a good way to end this chat, and really looking forward to future success and wish you all the very best.